Welcome to Sanity, a podcast by the New York Sun. My name is A.R. Hoffman, and every week, along with my co-host, Rebecca Sugar, we try to make sense out of the nonsense and bring just a little bit of sanity to your week.
So, Ari, the quote of the week is by Secretary Bessent, Scott Bessent, who was asked about Zohran Mamdani's likely win in New York. And he said, "I guarantee you, and there are not a lot of things in life that are sure, but New York will be coming to the federal government for a bailout if Mamdani's plans are implemented." And then the interviewer asked him, "Will you bail them out?" And his response was, "It will be the same thing that Gerald Ford said, drop dead." Which is a reference to in 1975, there was a headline that actually was not what Gerald Ford said, but it encapsulated what he said when a bailout was requested. And it will clearly be what New York is told again this time when Mamdani ruins our city and we need a bailout. And we will have deserved it for having elected him. Drop dead, New York.
Yeah, Zohran might have to ask Javier Milei for advice on how to score a bailout. Okay, well, welcome to UN Week here in the city. We're just feet really away from all the festivities.
You say that with excitement, but I'm not as excited as you are.
No. Well, I walk to work, so it's not too bad. So we're going to start with the news of the week, which is the UN Week here, just feet from where we're sitting. We'll talk about that Trump speech. Maybe we'll even take a trip up the escalator. But fear not, we're not reading from a teleprompter, broken or fixed. We'll also talk about the Russia-Ukraine situation, kind of a big about face, seems to me, on America's posture. We're also going to talk about, I think, a really interesting new policy shift on H-1B visas and what it might mean for immigration to this country. And then we kind of have a fun laundry list of things where we'll run through for Make It Make Sense and our sunlights and sunburns. Just to start off, Rebecca, the UN obviously meeting this week. Trump gave a speech that was almost an hour. The limit, I think, was about 15 minutes. One thing is that they cut you off if you're longer. Obviously, they didn't do that to Trump, but it was really vintage Trump. I mean, rambling, pugnacious. I think for a lot of people who have their fair share of gripes at the UN, welcome. Also a little bit kooky. But Trump was definitely being.
Do you have a favorite moment?
Well, I think. One thing that was sort of interesting was the kind of call out of England, given that he'd just been there for the royal dinner. He was
smart enough to wait till after the
right,
dinner.
Exactly, until after dessert. I thought the message on Gaza was succinct and effective. Basically, release the hostages and we'll talk. That had been the prelude to the speech, was the two-state conference on Monday convened by France and Saudi Arabia. I think one of the most arresting visuals was the panning to Israel's spot, which was empty yeah. as was the U.S.'s spot for that. It was
the Rosh Hashanah holiday.
Yeah. And that's especially on Tuesday, where there was a Security Council meeting and Israel on Gaza, and Israel obviously would normally given the right to participate, and they said, no, thank you. Not to fetch too much about it, but if this had happened on Christmas or on Eid, there's no way.
Right. Well, it wouldn't have happened.
It wouldn't have happened, yeah. And it just reinforces that there's only one Jewish state, and as the world thinks about making another another Muslim state, and then of course the escalator. I mean, that video was amazing.
Thank
right?
goodness Melania's in good shape.
She's in good shape, but with the high heels and getting caught in the escalator. But in typical Trumpian way, I think he seized on something and kind of memified it and made it a kind of shorthand.
Yeah. Well, like whether you view that conspiratorially or whether it was just bad operations
right.
at the UN.
Janky
Neither
escalator.
One's really good. Neither's a good look for the UN. I mean, we do pay for the place. The least they could do is have equipment that works, right?
I thought one of the funniest moments was when Trump said, a while ago, the UN asked me to redevelop it or something.
Yeah,
And he's
yeah.
like, I gave him a $500 million
He went
price
into
tag.
such
And it's
detail
like,
about the building. That
it was all of a
great.
sudden like Trump, the real estate
So
guy
good.
again,
Listen, this is what I voted for.
Yeah.
I thought this whole thing was like the Trumpian version of Vance at the Munich conference. It was such a moment. I loved it, getting up in front of the UN and telling them why the whole institution. I think he asked directly, like, what is this institution for? Right? Here I am stopping wars around the world. I don't even get a phone call. I mean, all you do is issue statements. And it's so true. Everyone knows it. It's why UN Week in New York is even more irritating, is because we know our traffic is being, marred because of a bunch of people who don't actually even do anything. Although sometimes I think that's a blessing and not a curse. But it was, what it felt like when you're not married, but you go to couples therapy. And you sit there and you kind of know you're getting divorced. Not that this is my situation, but I have a lot of friends in this. Going in, you're getting divorced, but you have to go through the couples therapy to say you did it. Yeah. This felt like the beginning, like the first session of couples therapy. Like America and Western Europe, which is really largely his audience during his talk, I felt, is kind of going through this nasty divorce. We don't have anything in common anymore. Yeah. And he just got up and said it out loud to them. Energy and immigration were his main points, and we really have nothing in common with Western Europe.
And
on
typical
those two
Trumpies
issues.
is you're killing all the cows. You're killing the cows.
The poor cows.
The poor cows.
They're killing themselves is really his real point, right? And that is an important point to make, because I believe that that's true. So I loved that whole moment, and I think what I don't love is that I think Western civilization is coming undone, or maybe it's just reordering, right? I mean, I feel like countries like Poland and Hungary sounded more American to me, or Western, let's say, in the speeches that have been given so far than the ones given by David Lammy of the UK or others. We just have more in common with new sets of countries than we have with, Germany and France.
Or Argentina, for example.
Or Argentina, right. And
I think that's a great, just to interrupt, just to underscore that point, Rebecca, I think this idea of more and more, both between America and Western Europe and Israel and Western Europe. I mean, those relationships are really kind of reaching a crisis. Right. In a way, doesn't really seem to be, even between America and Israel and the Arab world, right? Yeah. I mean, Trump had that big conference. It's impossible to imagine a similar sort of sit down happening with France and Spain and et cetera now.
And
right?
it's even more, I think, highlighted for me in the wake of Charlie Kirk's murder and what that's unleashed in this country in terms of Christian revival and like sort of a return to foundational American values. We're really, this country is standing in those values in a new way, first by electing President Trump and now in the wake of Charlie's death. And I think Western Europe is just not floating away, but running away from some of those foundational values, free speech, which we talk about a lot on this show, and other countries, as you say, like Argentina, are more aligned with us, and it's just the break, the divorce that seems to be happening. He just gave voice to in a new way, and I loved it actually because it's important to say out loud. And I just wanted to say the other standout moment for me was a really sad one. It was when Ben Affleck's daughter, Violet Affleck, stood up, 20 years old, masked for 5 years of this. I call her a child because I'm so much older than she is, but young woman's life. She's masked herself all this time. That just said everything to me. That was a moment where we understand what we've done in America to our youth. We have created a whole generation of young people in America who are literally deathly afraid of the world, who think that they can mask themselves from the thing that they fear in their head. And we've created this monster in America, and we platform it. We put it on a world stage and let it speak as though it has something of value and meaning and to say to us, which it does not. It is the opposite. The only meaning that we should take from that is that America's youth is in crisis, and we have helped to create that crisis. That poor girl should take the mask off and live her life and stop lecturing others about how to live theirs until she can get her own in order.
Yeah, no, that was terrible. I think with Trump, there's always a kind of like style and substance. I think whoever our next president is not going to go 4 times over, is not going to kind of have this stream of consciousness. So this, I think, is a very unique sort of kind of performer, and that sort of shamelessness, not necessarily in a bad way, but just really not caring what people think is an extraordinary
Lucky man.
quality.
Lucky.
He really doesn't, you know.
Don't you think it also, though, breaks through the noise? Have you ever? I have never. You probably have sat through the president's speech at the UN conference in full, riveted. I never really cared. I never paid attention, and I think maybe this is like all this, edutainment that he brings to the table is making us just pay attention, which is maybe not a bad thing.
Yeah, and then I think, what's, a positive, I think, about at least this administration so far is that, people like Rubio and Waltz, again, agree or disagree with them, are more, smooth-edged sort of people of etiquette and comportment. So no, just to say that I think it's a an overall approach, and you have the president kind of with his style, and then sort of the follow up is in a different sort of way. I think the split with Western Europe, I watched the entirety of the conference on Monday, is really stark. I mean, I think you could see, Bibi is speaking tomorrow. I don't think it would be shocking to see Israel close the French and British consulates in Jerusalem. Those aren't the embassies, which are in Tel Aviv, but the consulates. And you have a real split, I have to say, part of me worries that really the only country standing between Israel and real isolation is America. Maybe that's just a kind of vestigial multilateralist in me says, it makes me nervous. I don't think it's Israel's fault. I'm not saying that, but I think I hope there's some strategic thinking here about how these relationships, if they can be repaired, how they can be repaired. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're not salvageable.
I wonder too. I wonder if in Europe they're sitting around reading their newspapers or watching their news and thinking the same thing about us, but in the opposite direction, and thinking, okay, David Lammy, he got up and talked about sustainable development goals and all the things that have been repeated. It almost, you could have given the speech, I could have given the speech, nothing new, just the same, as if no time has passed, and as if the American president has not changed, and that the trajectory of America has not changed. And I wonder if the average British citizen sits there and says, are we getting a divorce from a country that we kind of love and don't want to get a divorce from because our leadership is just on repeat? They're just stuck on that groove on the record player, and they can't stop saying the same things over and over again. The world has moved on.
Yeah. Well, I think the best support for that argument, Rebecca, would be is that nearly all of these European leaders are facing real crisis internally, right? These are not popular leaders. It's not that we have sort of like this figure who's galvanized. Macron cuts a nice figure, he looks good. He kind of seems imperial, but you actually dig into French politics, it's a mess. Yeah. It's a total mess. And the same, Labour and Starmer's government is an even hotter mess. So these are
their economies are a mess.
Their economies are a mess. They're kind of how would you say it? Like the vibes aren't good. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like the sort of overall, it's sour, right? So I think you're absolutely right to say that something here is not working, and just as much internally.
Sorry, they're I'm back to the couples therapy image. It's like the wife's nagging the husband, like, you've gained 100 pounds. You're going to have a heart attack. You smoke. You stay out late. Like she lists all the things that he's doing wrong to live his life wrong, and she's saying, I kind of still love you, or I wouldn't be in this couples therapy room with you. Yeah. Please stop doing all these things. Yeah. And then David Lammy's like, well, we have to go back to sustainable goals for 2030. It's just...
Yeah, and this is to your point of breaking through. And Trump says your countries are going to hell, right? I mean, that kind of that kind of lands...
I want a divorce.
In a certain way.
Yeah.
But, I think... there's a way in which I think what we're both saying is, something this week maybe, and not just this week, has proven clarifying about sort of like where everyone stands, and I think, Israel's perspective and position that, there won't be a Palestinian state, there can't be a Palestinian state in the current arrangement is, something that, from my time in Israel just a couple of weeks ago, is that your man on the street thinks that. I mean, this isn't a position where Bibi is at a different place than, Vered and Kfar Saba. I mean,
Right.
it's a consensus opinion.
The British are probably already regretting that after they get hit with like that. What was it? A lawsuit for reparations that like the next day after they announced this.
Yeah. I will say, I do think, alignment with the Palestinian cause is not a winner long term for the Europeans.
Or for Palestinians, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So in some ways, though, the biggest news I'd say coming out of the UN is not on the Israel front, but on this Russia-Ukraine front. Trump seems to have done a 180. Says that Ukraine can recapture territory. I think whatever you think of Zelensky, I think he's really rode this wave out, and kind of maybe changed his tone, changed his appearance. I don't know his jacket, but seems to have kind of won Trump over. It's hard to know what to make of this. I mean, is this just Trump's way of kind of washing his hands of things? I think he is frustrated at Putin. Not to be. We might disagree on this, but I think Trump has realized that what a lot of people realized for a while, that Russia is the aggressor here. Russia isn't interested in a deal.
I think, we don't totally agree on that. I think Trump always knew that Russia started this war for sure, but why he started it.
But they don't want to end it, right? That's the thing, right?
I wonder who does want to end it at this point. I think Trump, when he said good luck, he meant good luck and goodbye. He doesn't want anything to do with this much anymore, and I don't see that he changed any actual position. He just changed his rhetoric, right? All he said was, we're not going to go in. We're not going to actually write you a check. We're going to sell our weapons to the Europeans. And if they want to buy it and help you out, I hope it works out for you guys. And so that's not really different than what he's been doing, actually. It's just different in the way in which he's said it, which matters, but it's not everything. And it sort of feels like it called to mind the interview we did with Aviv Shapira a few weeks ago about drone technology in warfare. And when you think about it, that's where the stage of this war is.
We've already seen that. I mean, with Russian drones now over Poland and over Denmark.
Right. But like drones are the future of this war and how it seems like it's going to be won. And that would require a lot of spending on the part of the Europeans and a lot of ramp up because they're not producing drones at scale yet of the sort that are needed by the Ukrainians to push back against Russia. And so let's see if the Europeans stand up and actually pay for their rhetoric. I'm not so sure. I don't know. This looks like a good moment for the Ukraine because everyone's saying the things that you wanted to hear, but who cares? It's really, will they do the things he needs them to do in order, in my view, not even to win. I don't think that there's any world in which the Ukrainians are winning a war against Russia, but can they just continue to not lose? And I don't know that the Europeans are really going to put their money where their mouths are. I think it's also what is interesting about what Trump said. The one little piece at the end of his sentence about, and the Ukrainians might even be able to win back some Russian territory too, that just struck back to the beginning of, that felt like a ding because a lot of people, myself included, feel that it was an American, Vice President Kamala Harris at the time, who went to Europe and declared that NATO, that Ukraine would become part of NATO, and that would sort of bump NATO right up to Russia's border. And Russia's fear was then triggered that Russian territory was being threatened. And I feel like saying that, Trump this time saying that about how the Ukraine might be able to go into Russia and even take part of Russian territory, which no one has ever even conceived of, was sort of like hearkening back to that initial fear that Russians have, that really NATO's agenda.
It's not clear what he meant. I mean, maybe he means Crimea or the Donetsk or, areas that Russia has conquered. So, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting, it's definitely an interesting question about what kind of shift this represents. I mean, one other angle here is what I mentioned about the Poland-Denmark. I mean, will we see wider European participation in the war in a more kinetic way? I mean, Poland really said, I think it was at the Security Council, basically
so this is your warning.
This is your warning.
Why do you think Putin is trying to provoke that?
I don't know. I don't think drones fly over Poland by mistake. I mean, I think clearly there's a game of chicken here or testing. I don't know.
That's the thing that worries me most. And all of this, that's the only real news here, it seems to me, is that Russia seems to be trying to say, okay, let's go. And nobody wants that.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder, I don't think it's
China wants that. Actually,
China wants
I'm wrong.
that.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's an exact apt comparison, but I think of the Trump's decision, which he mentioned, to bomb Iran, and I don't think we're going to bomb Russia, but I wonder, would there be America's support for a more aggressive Ukrainian attack? I don't know. It's very hard to
not
figure
before
out.
the midterms. No,
Yeah.
don't do that, President Trump. Your base will never forgive you.
Is that because they're pro-Russia?
It's because they are anti, it's because no one has yet to answer the question if, and I say God forbid, the Ukraine were entirely taken over by Russia tomorrow.
Yeah.
Why would the average man or woman living in Idaho feel any differently about their day? What would actually impact America's interests? If they can answer that question, they might be able to get some of those people to look the other way in the midterms if a kinetic war starts and America gets involved. But if they can't answer that in one or two sentences without waxing poetic about democracy and NATO, then that would not be a good move.
Yeah. I wonder if, obviously we still have 3 years left of this presidency, but, it seems to me that, this is going to really be a question or continue to be a question for the next Republican president. I mean, I one shorthand way is to say, like, it seems to me the two contenders right now for, let's say 3 contenders for the mantle of Trumpism would be like J.D. Vance, which I think, would be that kind of more isolationist. And then you have someone like Marco Rubio, who is not that. And then maybe someone like Ted Cruz. So I don't know. I think these questions at a deep philosophical level are going to continue for years to come.
Well, that's that's really the point, isn't it? It's sort of Trump is looking at the midterms. He has his sort of more MAGA base, isolationist base. He's got the Rubio guys, and he has to keep that tent together if he wants to win. And so he's sort of saying one thing, kind of not doing what he's saying.
Yeah, totally.
That's the way to go politically.
Yeah, and it's a big tent. And I think sometimes like people forget that when they just talk about like, think of it as one thing, but actually it's a much bigger tent than the Democrats, for example.
Yeah.
Okay, so we also wanted to talk about this new policy of, charging $100,000 for an H-1B visa. Those are those skilled visas. I think the cost right now is $10,000, and these are usually I think the visas that they're work visas basically that are usually covered by companies, right?
Right, for highly skilled positions,
employees. Right. So this seems to me kind of like, if there's like a core of MAGA like ideology, I say this in just a descriptive way, this would kind of be it, right? Like for kind of formatting immigration policy to encourage domestic hiring, right? And to deter, using government to deter, in a pretty I don't know, heavy-handed way, but incentive-laden way to deter, foreign visa holders, right? So what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, the idea that idea, and I agree with it, that, Americans who are graduating from STEM programs and can't get jobs because the system is flooded with people from overseas who are cheaper, that needs to be addressed, right? And I think that what President Trump sort of announced, and again, the rollout here was also very confusing. Is it annually? Is it?
Right.
Yeah, it's not. There are a lot of walkbacks. But I think this is more signaling than anything else. The real problem in this space is in Silicon Valley, of course, and those huge companies. First of all, if they had to pay $100,000 for talent that they really wanted, they could afford to do it. It's not exactly a large amount of money. It's like losing $1 out of my pocket. Right. Maybe less, maybe 10 cents. Right. So I don't think this is harming them financially, and it's also true that a lot of them,
a little bit of a deterrent, if you have to do it
around the margins, but it's not striking at the heart of the problem. And the heart of the problem is also that H-1B visas are being used by these companies, but so are a lot of other programs and other kinds of visas. There's something called the OPT program where you hire these young students or recent graduates, and you get a year of work experience, when you hire them, and then you can extend that visa for another 2 years for STEM. So you get 3 years through that program, and this announcement didn't touch that program. And there are hundreds of thousands of such people every year going through this the system in the United States. So I think this was sort of messaging. This was Trump saying to his base, I care about this issue. But it was saying to the big tech companies, I'm not going to actually bother you very much on it.
Yeah. Wasn't this a debate in a few months ago or last year between like Vivek and Elon Musk?
Elon lost his mind even now, right? I mean, I can't even repeat on air what he posted when he heard about this recent announcement. But yes, it was.
And that's interesting, right? Like this divide with about like, and maybe it's just do you think it's a tech, non-tech divide? How do you think it like cuts where it falls out?
It feels like it's mostly a tech. I'm sure there are other kinds of companies that are affected by this, but the big tech companies are so big that they can import whatever they need at whatever price, but why not import it more cheaply if you can? And they've been getting away with it. The truth is, it's not just that we have an H-1B visa program that is problematic for the MAGA base. It's the widespread abuse of it, and everybody knows that it's been used to import cheap labor.
Yeah, I remember when I lived in Palo Alto or H-1B, it was a thing people knew, you know, and it was kind of, I guess like if we want to like maybe drill down a little bit on the level of like ideas or ideals, you know, it seems to me on the one hand, totally get it, like totally want like your average American to get that great job at Google and whatever. You know, on the other hand, luring talented people from all over the world is sort of also in the great American tradition, right?
Yeah, if they have a specific unique talent that can't be found here, meaning if we have incredible talent that it rises to the level of working at Google or Meta or one of these places and developing the technologies of the future, 100% of the time I'd rather hire an American who's at that level. This visa program, I understood it to be used for the purposes of hiring and talent that you simply couldn't recruit here. And it should be scarce, right?
Yeah.
But there's no reason that we aren't producing that kind of talent. Maybe that's another question to look at.
Right, a more long-term question. You know, so if you had said like, I think it's probably true that like at scale, most of the like really like top tier engineers are coming from China and India, right? Now,
is that because they're just better at those jobs?
What's the chicken and egg question to it? I think that's, you know, I think this is why it's such a fun, I think, policy to track, because it really, you know, in a way, I think that like, you know, massive immigration feels like at least there seems to be a consensus among everyone besides not on like the kooky left that like we need to cut immigration, we need to, you know, decrease. I think most folks agree with that. It's why Trump won twice, in large part. But I think when you get into these nitty gritty questions or more boutique questions, you know, of like, do you want, you know, the world's, you know, the next, I'm not saying he wasn't on H-1B, but like, you know, could there have been an American Elon Musk? I mean, yeah, but we probably want the Elon Musks of the world coming from South Africa.
I think it'd be fun if we could
like,
name them, right? Like if you had, you know, 3 dozen Elon Musks that we brought in that way, that'd be fine. But if we have hundreds of thousands of them or tens of thousands of them, and what's the demarcation line in between? I have no idea exactly. But, you know, human nature is always about incentives, right? And like when you open the border and offer a welfare state, you offer the incentive for, you know, tens of millions of people to cross your border. And when you offer companies ways to save money and hire the best talent, they're going to pour in, you know, as many people as they can possibly get cheaper. So government's job is to just balance the incentives so they make sense for the American people.
I think you're right to say that, like, you know, obviously for, you know, OpenAI and Meta and Google, $100,000 is nothing. But yeah, I think keeping an eye on kind of top end talent, top tier talent, where it's going. I mean, these are important things to kind of monitor.
Well, you want to talk James Comey for a minute? And just give us your quick review of
I was just
going
to do that as my sunlight.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we're on the verge of a really big story, and I want, you know, folks to hear it first with us. And that is that, just to catch people up, you know, there's been this drama in the Eastern District of Virginia, which is a federal prosecutorial office. Apparently, the former U.S. attorney there, who was an ex-DC cop, kind of well-liked overall, you know, was just dragging his feet on bringing a case against James Comey for perjury and against Letitia James for mortgage fraud. Eventually, the White House's patience ran out, and he was fired/resigned. interesting kind of chain of command question, right? A U.S. attorney reports to the attorney general, so they're not really empowered to kind of make their own decisions. On the other hand, it's like in any system, you want people who are thinking critically and kind of like evaluating, the evidence and all of that. It's sort of a replay of what happened here in New York with Danielle Sassoon refusing to drop the charges against Eric Adams, but in reverse, this is about bringing charges. So Trump has installed a new person there, and the statute of limitations on the Comey perjury runs out on the 30th. Mm-hmm. So there's really a time crunch here. By the time you're listening to this, charges might already have been brought. But keep listening because you'll still learn something. And so I think we're going to have these cases brought to a grand jury that, the lawyers there are kind of, lukewarm on or don't really think there are strong cases, and we'll see. I mean, so there's some downside for the administration here. One is a grand jury refuses to bring an indictment. That would be embarrassing. Two, they bring the case to jury and the jury acquits. On the other hand, who knows? Maybe the evidence is stronger than we know. We don't have access to all the evidence yet.
The charge is lying to Congress, right? Or
the charge for Comey is lying to Congress.
Right.
Yeah. And the James charge is mortgage fraud, filling out wrong information on mortgage.
So what could happen to Comey if he's convicted of lying to Congress? What will they? Do you go to jail for that really in America anymore?
Yeah, I don't know. I should know the punishment, but it's a felony, so technically, yeah, you could go to jail. I think with a lot of these things, you kind of have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt intention to lie or intention to mislead on mortgage documents. So, I feel a little queasy about these cases. To me, it feels like a little bit like these are Trump's enemies. We know they're his enemies. If they're guilty, they're guilty. But, it's the classic thing people said when Trump was under investigation. If you look at anyone closely enough, you'll find something. Is
that how you feel about the Comey case, though? It doesn't feel like we're searching for something.
I think the James case. I think I think like these mortgage documents. I mean, from what I've heard, the evidence isn't really conclusive. The Comey, yeah.
Comey lied to the whole country about the Russian collusion hoax. It's not that he just attacked Donald Trump. He attacked everybody. Yeah, Isn't that a bigger, weightier issue?
Well, you'd have to. Lying in general is not a crime. You'd have to really look at what he said to Congress and do they have the goods on it? So I think something has shifted in Trump, not shifted, but come to fruition where he's right now. He really wants to go after these people, and he said it to Pambani. He said maybe they won't be convicted, but let's just do it.
Yeah, Yeah.
So rocky, good material coming up at the DOJ, and it's a good story to watch.
Great. My Sunlight is just a story that we wanted to talk about, but there's so much going on that we didn't have time to really fully explore it. But in September, there was a strategic mutual defense agreement struck between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, Pakistan being a nuclear power, and which says that an attack against one is an attack against both, effectively, and that Saudi Arabia felt the need. They've had a relationship with Pakistan for a long time, and so that part of it's not new. But this particular sort of declaration, this defense treaty, is new, and it sort of suggests to me that there's something about countries around the world not seeing themselves as part of the orbit of the United States anymore, and relying on their protection. Not that we had a specific treaty with Saudi Arabia to protect them, but we've been working together a lot, and one assumed, especially after the Iranian attack by the United States and Israel, that the Saudis would have felt that the United States just took out one of their major threats and enemies, and that they would have leaned more into the United States as their ally in this regard. They turned toward Pakistan, a country that is not so friendly. So it concerns me. It's something just to watch. I don't really have any deeper thoughts about it than that.
No, it's a great point, Rebecca. I think a couple things is like there are far more bad actors in the world than good actors, and the Pakistan thing is worrisome. Pakistan is a nuclear armed state, is a huge sponsor of terrorism, I think, it's kind of not relationship, but bad relationship with India seems to be heating up. I think
they also don't recognize Israel, and
of
we're
course not.
hoping
They're
that the Saudis
like
are going to sign on to the
no,
Abraham
they're
Accords.
totally not on the team.
And so that's a concern.
And just think, I mean, when bin Laden was found in Pakistan, America struck, right? A Saudi national, by the way.
Yeah.
Would that now trigger, some kind of reprisal? Right? I mean, if a
lucky we got him when we did.
Lucky we got him when he did. But Israel just struck Qatar. I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility to think that we would want to be able to act there.
Yeah.
I think Pakistan is a real problem, and everyone's been saying it forever, so it's not a hot take. But I absolutely agree with you, and I think there was a lot of kind of Pollyannish thinking about Saudi Arabia, and I think there is a lot positive. It's modernization, some of it's internal loosening up, sort of
women are finally allowed to drive, and we're all celebrating.
Are not like a table, but it's still trust it as far as you can throw it kind of thing.
And I wonder why they chose to do it now. Right after Iran, it almost feels like a signal to the United States, like, hey, we're not that close to you. Like, thanks for the help, buddy, and now we're going to go lead in the other direction. It just didn't feel great. So we'll see.
And I also think it just means that America, and I don't fully understand this like weird spat we have with India. Like, it seems to me India actually is a country we should be like really trying to draw close to. I mean, they also have a problem with terrorism. They're a huge so I think on that score, color me Team India. Okay, so my sunburn is just going to be a pattern I've noticed emerging, and that is two of the grandees of the Democratic Party, President Obama and Vice President Harris, have both had events in the last 2 weeks disrupted by, Gaza genocide protesters. Okay, nothing new there, but a couple of things I noticed about it. One is that both their responses were the same, such that it almost seemed to me that like they're sharing notes, or at least Harris was just copying it, and it was, "I'm not the president, don't bother me." I mean, which is like not exactly the response I would think of, right? I would maybe kind of say something or not say something or just say shut up. I don't know. But like this weird, I'm not in power. It seems to me what the Democrats should be trying to do should be exactly the opposite. They should be saying, what would you do? They should be laying out an affirmative vision. They should be, people should be thinking of turning to them as serious interlocutors. So this idea of like, it just seems so weak to me. And so, such an evasion of responsibility. I would almost rather they said something I disagreed with than to say, don't bother me, I'm not setting policy. I mean, what is that?
Well, they were getting heckled right while they were in office. I mean, certainly Kamala Harris and Joe Biden were, and they weren't making people happy when they were in power. So I guess they just figured now that we're not in power, we definitely want to stay out of this.
Yeah, and just my second takeaway is that this heckler's veto, as it's called, the ability of the loudest person in the audience to kind of is going to be a real problem for Democrats in the primary coming up. And I think they really are going to have to think about, what to do about this, such that I think it really will prevent certain candidates from even achieving liftoff. And I just, it's something to keep an eye on.
That's interesting to think about, like who the candidates might be and then what they would be heckled about.
Yeah. Well, everyone's going to get heckled.
And who has a good answer.
Right, exactly. And who has a good answer. And this is going to be a real component, I think, of like how a candidate is selected is going to be this, like that person screaming in the audience.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. My sunburn is just about Google, which wrote a letter to the House Judiciary Committee this week, finally acknowledging what we all knew to be true, that they had indeed been pressured by the Biden administration to censor Americans, mostly about COVID-19, but also about the 2020 elections. And so it's not new that it happened, and there have been lawsuits, and we've talked about it and there's still, I think, outstanding. Alex Berenson still has a lawsuit outstanding against the government for their role in that kind of censorship against him. But I think the real sunburn is to the heads of Google, who are admitting this now. What cowardice! What a bunch of weak cowards you are, Google. Don't cancel my Gmail account. But really, for years you were pressured. You pretended like it wasn't happening. You lied. And now you're going to restore people's accounts years later after they've been demonetized and shamed and embarrassed and say, oopsie, and that's enough? It's not nearly enough. Censorship only happens when the government enforces it and when people as rich and powerful as Google and as Jack Dorsey at Twitter allow it to happen. If they aren't going to stand up and fight the machine, then who is? The average person. Alex Berenson was the average guy before this, in a sense, and he's fighting it. He has the courage and he has the resources. Google should have had all of that and more, and they didn't, and they failed everybody in this country. And so sunburn on them.
Okay. Thanks, Rebecca. We'll see you next week.